Okay. So first things first, if you're going into this movie, uh, I would say with the expectation of thinking that it's gonna be played out almost exactly like the first one, then no, you need to halt those expectations right then and there. Um, because I just finished watching Den of Thieves too, and I gotta say, personally, I like the first movie better, but I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. Um, I know that seems very paradoxical, but yeah, if anything, yeah, I enjoyed two far more than I enjoyed one. I recently rewatched one because it was such a long time ago when I saw it, and then I was like, I remember the twist, but not really much else, and so went back and rewatched it, and still holds up, still a good fine movie. And then upon seeing the sequel, yeah, there's nothing in the sequel that essentially was a moment that I was like, ugh, or just like, all right, this isn't necessary. It's dragging on. This is dumb. There's plenty of scenes like that in the first one. You got the weird, you got the boy coming over to ask out 50 Cent's daughter. You got the Leonidas sleeping with the stripper chick that belonged to the leader of the gang that's robbing the banks. But that was intentional. Shit like that. You got Leonidas talking to his daughter at school because he's going through friggin' marital problems, or when this motherfucker popped up at a party and his wife was at to try and bully his way back into her heart. It was very weird. It's very weird. But those scenes essentially are all throughout the first movie, and they're kind of like, whatever. You could really do without those scenes, and the movie is still a good movie. And honestly, it seems as if they took notice of that and they did that towards the sequel. But therein lies the problem with the sequel as far as the overall concept. Because they were basically banking off of, I would say, trying to not do exactly the same thing from the first movie, is that they kind of tripped themselves up by making it to where when they did implement a twist, which is ironically exactly the same thing they did in the first movie, when they did implement it, it had no value to it whatsoever. Unlike the first one. In the first one, I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's just there is a twist. But in the first one, when it was executed, it was done well. It actually was memorable. It made the movie hold up a hell of a lot better than the essential just back and forth between cops and robbers. On some Heat bullshit. And then much like with Heat, they had a really great, excellent shootout scene, which kind of ties a lot of what went on with the movie together, especially with as a final confrontation between, the antagonist and the protagonist, whoever you saw fit to fit that description, which again was another better executed concept within the first movie that they didn't even have in the second one. But all of those things came, like I'm saying, like I'm just gushing about the first one, but all of those things came together and it just made the first movie work really well. And then it had a twist that was like, oh shit, cool. And then it just also worked really well, especially considering who it was that was giving information that you were kind of leading with, and then exactly what that information led up to and how it's handled. Within the sequel, you essentially cut out all the guff. You don't really get into the nitty gritty of what's going on with Leonidas's family issues and whatnot. You kind of start off the movie showing him come out of divorce court, and then he's like removing his wedding ring angrily, and then he like destroys a fucking one of those heat vents to dry hand heat vents. But you can tell that he was going to break that, and essentially that's how predictable most of this movie becomes. It's like everything is just, the deck is set up exactly to read out like every single plot point, every single twist, every single turn. So much stuff is done with the intention of it basically being like, oh, this is gonna pop up later, and it's like, yeah, but I bet it's gonna be like this, and it does, and it's the exact same thing. I mean, the movie goes so far as to set up shit in a stupid way in the long run, that you have two people who essentially are in disagreement with Ice Cube's son, Oshak Hennessy. Yeah, they're in disagreement with Oshak Hennessy from basically leading the gang and calling the shots for what it is that they're doing when there's no reason for them not to trust him. There's no reason for them to be in a disagreement with him or anything like that. They didn't really do anything that kind of he didn't do anything that kind of showcased that, like, oh, like they should have a problem following his rule if he's the one who planned out the job or whatever. But then not only are those people essentially in disagreement of him being the group leader, but they also are the ones who are responsible for the exit trail for the heist. So how to get away, what cars they use, and what route they take. And then later on, those people essentially get ousted out of the plan after they made up a bulk of what the plan was. But then it was like, all right, they're out. They're not gonna participate. And it's like, wait a minute, those guys were responsible though for how we're gonna escape. And it's like, yeah, with the goods, right? They're criminals, right? And so my brain was like, as soon as they said they're out, my brain just went, you killed them, right? Because I wouldn't leave someone like that alive. You plan on breaking into a place that essentially seems impregnable, and these dudes they know how it is that you plan on escaping with the stuff after you did all the hard part. After you did the hard part. Wouldn't it make sense to make sure those people aren't capable of doing such a thing? But no, it was just like we fired them. You fired criminals. You can't do that. They're criminals. You fired criminals, and then you assumed the honor system would keep them from coming after you or something. Unbelievably stupid. But again, I bet you wonder what all that led up to. But it's like, yeah, that's kind of how the movie really played itself. It just kept doing so many things. I was like, oh, I know what this is leading to. I know what this is going to. And then ultimately, when it got to the twist that supposedly was a twist, it wasn't a twist. It was everything you could have possibly expected, because they did nothing to actually drive home any type of other explainable storyline. Like it had no choice but to go to that route. And yet the movie tried to play it as if, oh no, we pulled another twist. We got you again. It's like, nah, someone should have contacted M. Night or something, because this was stupid. This was really stupid. and it was one of those things that essentially was like, it went so far as to destroy character, as far as Oshak Hennessy is concerned, because of how intelligent he was in the first movie. The things that he did in this movie seemed incredibly stupid, especially for him being someone that is the brains of an operation as well as an orchestrator, and someone who is totally fine with using people and getting what he wants and getting out of there. Even to the point where this movie tried to explain his actions from the first movie as if he has this need to rob and steal and the adrenaline of doing all that. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that he would have to compromise his safety, or whether or not he thinks something is like on the up and up, or if he thinks he can get caught or whatnot, or if anything, have him have backup plans for his backup plans, but they decided to not implement that, which was crazy considering that was like a major key factor behind his character within the first movie. But whatever. But again, the movie itself, Leonidas and Oshak Hennessy, they actually had really cool chemistry back and forth between them, especially as playing characters that both kind of grew up in the same area and neighborhood and whatnot. Stuff like that was cool. Like that actually was cool. And honestly, if the movie would have dove more on that, it probably would have had a better interpretation of essentially the first Fast and the Furious movie, or Point Break if you're an OG. It would have had far more of a connection between characters like that. And if the movie would have dove deeper into that, it just would have held up better. The twist would have hit harder. The impact behind a lot of the characters speaking and saying things. I mean, you just have these run-of-the-mill villains, and they didn't really get into anything about them. Similar, much like with, actually, no, not much like, but I would say the opposite of like the first one, where again, you saw 50 Cent's family in his home. You saw how close all of the gang members were that were implemented in the bank robbery. You saw how close and how intricate the cops were. They weren't crooked cops. They were bad guys, you know? So we didn't, even to the point of the first movie, because they didn't get the money, we don't even know if essentially they were trying to get the money to split between them, or were they just trying to do their due diligence. And as far as you are concerned within the first movie, they even state they were trying to close the case on multiple crimes that they believe were committed by these guys. And if they would have caught them in the act, then that would have been further proof that they were the ones that did it, because it fit their MO. So, and it's like, so they were being cops. It's just that they were cops that would, party with hookers and whatnot and beat the shit out of criminals and not arrest them properly and do dirt to get the job done. But as far as being a cop is concerned, they weren't bad. They weren't crooked cops. They were just bad guys. So, and then like even for them to state that in the first one. So to not have any of those elements within this movie, again, it benefited because it cut out all the gruff that the first one had that was weighing it down, but it hurt it because essentially that gruff was kind of there as an illusion to trick you from the overall twist that went on, which again, implemented well. And within this one, it's like, well, without that gruff, you don't really have anything that would make you think otherwise when it came towards the execution of the twist. While as at the first one, if you remove that gruff, the twist would still be, it'd still be like, oh shit. It wouldn't really get taken away. It just kind of added on to you not even thinking that that was a possibility. So if it was implemented without all of that extra nonsense, dealing with Leonidas' family and him messing with his wife and shit like that, that wouldn't take away from the overall execution of what was going on, as well as the intensity of the bank heist, as well as the robberies and all the stuff like that. It still would have been a fine movie. And so with this one, by cutting that stuff out and kind of slowly building up a relationship between Shaq Hennessy and Leonidas, you just didn't really hit the bar because you didn't do anything else with any other character. You had like 2 moments between those characters. Once they shared a conversation, and then they like talked on the phone for a minute after being threatened, and then it was like, I'm in. It was like, was it that Rick and Morty bullshit? And it was like, you son of a bitch, I'm in. It felt like that. But again, I enjoyed what that movie was because it didn't have all of that unnecessary fluff within the script and its story, but it didn't add anything to character or to the overall concept that would make me believe the other way, in terms of like, oh, this movie's gonna play out like this, which it did exactly. And whether or not you enjoyed it, like that's an opinion thing. Whether or not you enjoyed it, that's an opinionated thing. But to me, the final shootout was lackluster, especially when you compare it to the first movie. The overall concept behind what it is they were doing in the heist, that actually was well executed and the best part of the movie. But genuinely ending on the note that it did in order to try and justify the supposed twist that they had at hand, just made everything fall flat. And it just ugh. I mean, hell, even thinking of how the first movie was, where they did the heist and then they had the shootout, because everything just went to shit, only then for you to find out that there was more to this than meets the eye. Within this movie, it was like they did the heist, they have a shootout with some cars, and then it just kind of ends. So like, yeah, like I said, I enjoy, but it's like, again, if I'm not gonna I'm saying what I'm saying because of the fact that it's like, well, with everything that they've done and everything that they did within this movie, and it's like, I wish it would have ended on a high note, not really just a lackluster thing. But again, the movie was very fun to watch. It was very enjoyable to see. The back and forth between the two characters and what it is that they had going on was cool. Seeing the police work being done and how that was implemented, that was actually, well, the police work and the heist work, that was actually fun and interesting, you know. And it's like, again, like most heist things, they're cool to see. So it was like them doing what they were doing was cool, was fun, it was interesting. It's just that I wish that the end result could have been on a high note, much like the first movie, rather than just kind of, it's kind of fizzled out. And it's like, most likely they're gonna make a third one. But And it's like, yeah, I would hope they would put more into it than what they did with this one, as far as the overall development and the story is concerned. And then if anything, you don't need to have a twist. You can just have a character dynamic, a back and forth between them doing another heist, having more detective work and shit like that implemented, much like with the first one, and then just kind of seeing, all right, who's gonna get over on who. Then that'll be it. It just work it like that. Don't work it as if, oh, you need to, M. Night yourself or anything. We always gotta have like a little twist and turn type thing. No, you don't need to do that. Again, the movie itself, it holds up on its own. The twist being added into the sequel actually did more harm than good, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I would recommend to go watch this movie if you ain't got nothing else to watch. If you haven't seen Sonic 3 with your kids and you just got some time off or whatever, hey, go see Den of Thieves 2. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. Yeah. So, it's been another episode of Fun Flame. I've been your host, Danieltheflame. As always, good people. Hope you had fun.